Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. It is great to be with you this fine evening, and boy, do we have a show planned for tonight. We're going to be looking at the current political landscape in America right now, heading up to what is probably one of the most important elections in the history of this country, maybe in the history of the world, if you're looking at like what could potentially lead to the end of the world, right? If things go completely haywire, as we've seen. But there's a lot of details we're looking at today and going back in history, looking into some books. I've got some good books to share with you folks tonight to look at the psychology of crowd control and the importance of controlling the masses and the mechanisms of controlling the masses and how to see past those control mechanisms. We've also got a few more breaking news type items talking about monkeypox, which is now being entered into the discussion again, and some other information particularly surrounding a massive cybersecurity leak where literally, as far as I understand, every single American had their social security number stolen. Okay, we'll be talking about this and what I think might be behind it, because maybe it just so relates to digital ID, that kind of stuff. So before we jump in, we have a few quick notes for you. First off, we are giving away free silver. Okay. Every Friday, we're giving away 5 ounces of free silver. So if you want to win 5 ounces, it's 5 1-ounce coins of free silver, pure 0.999 silver, go to maninamerica.com/win, which is in the description below the show as well. So maninamerica.com/win. You put in your first name and your email, and we will enter you in to win 5 ounces of silver every Friday. Right. So we're going to be re-entering everyone into the drawing every Friday. So you could win multiple times potentially. And if you don't win this week, maybe you'll win next week. So again, that's maninamerica.com/win. The other thing I want to talk to you folks about before we jump into tonight's show is, imagine that, precious metals again. So you see this silver right here. Folks, I'm not sure what your perspective is, but for me, I don't trust the system. Okay. I don't trust the government. I don't trust the banking system. I don't trust the media. I trust myself. I trust God. I trust the people that I know, but I don't have a whole lot of trust in the system. And I don't have a whole lot of trust in the dollar, especially looking at what's happening with this de-dollarization campaign that's happening with the BRICS countries actively working to basically send the US dollar into hyperinflation. And if you look around, you can see it's already there, right? You can see maybe not hyperinflation, but ask yourself, how much was your grocery bill, 4 years ago? For me, my grocery bills have doubled and tripled since about 4 years ago. And folks, this is inflation. Now they're lying to us. They're saying, "Oh, inflation's at 3%." It's like, oh, come on, really? 3% inflation? Like, do you guys that make these studies that say inflation's at 3%? Do you go shopping? Right? Do you do anything that actually interacts with the real world where you're forced to buy things? Because inflation is a whole lot more than that. As a good example of how much the dollar has lost its value, let's imagine that this was a gold coin. Okay, in the 1920s, when a gold coin, a single 1-ounce gold coin was worth $20, they're interchangeable. Okay, a gold coin or a $20 bill could buy you a complete suit, right? I'm talking like a nice suit, shoes, belt, and everything. Fast forward to today, that $20 will literally buy you, if you're lucky, like a handkerchief for your pocket or maybe a cheap tie, let alone a whole suit. But an ounce of gold will still buy you that same suit, right? That's a great analogy for it. Shows that while the dollar is losing its purchasing power, the precious metals don't, right? The precious metals still hold their value, which is why I'm so excited about precious metals, because that's just, I practice what I preach, right? So if you have even a little bit of your money, say your IRA, 401k, your savings, if you put that into precious metals, silver and gold, folks, it's an insurance policy. It's not some sort of get rich scheme. It's so that if the dollar or anything else crazy happens, or look, we'll talk about what just happened with the Social Security theft, right? Or like right now, for instance, there's been a massive cyber attack in Iran, and the entire central bank of Iran is not accessible. It's down. The ATMs are not accessible. So by leaving all of our assets in a system that the elites have control over, we're kind of sitting ducks, which is why I'm a big fan of gold and silver. So if you want someone that you can trust to buy gold and silver from, there's no company I recommend more than Noble Gold, right? Colin Plume, CEO, great guy, good friend. Noble Gold is a fantastic company. If you're looking for a company, especially that specializes in IRA or 401k transfers, where they can make sure you don't get hit by those big fees, that's Noble Gold. So to check it out, download your free investment guide. Go to goldwithseth.com, or you call 626-654-1906. Again, goldwithseth.com or 626-654-1906. And honestly, folks, if you think like I do, if you think there's any chance of our society being turned upside down in the next 5 or 10 years, putting some of your assets, I'm not saying, dude, look, don't go dump all your money into precious metals, especially if you don't have food and brass and water and all those things. Don't go do that. But if you have a little bit set aside that you're saving, say under your mattress, that's a great amount of money to put into precious metals because it's an insurance policy. That's what it is. All right, so folks, diving into today's show, I told you I'd be starting off with monkeypox. Okay, so let's take a look at this. If you've been following me for a little while, you know that I've talked a lot about the pandemic treaty and what powers are shifted to the WHO through the pandemic treaty. And when they declare actually, I'll play the video and then we'll get into it. So I want to look at Mr. Tedris up on screen. So here is Tedris declaring what's happening with monkeypox. This is about 51 seconds, but this is very important, especially as we're heading into election season. Imagine the timing, right? Quite the coincidence. Okay.
Today, the emergency committee met and advised me that, in its view, the situation constitutes a public health emergency of international concern.
So you can hear that. A public health emergency of international concern, right? Those are the key words. It's like a spell. It's an incantation. A public health emergency of international concern. This lies at the heart of the pandemic treaty. So the fact that he's coming out and saying these words, this is giving the go-ahead, right? So we're talking about lockdowns, forced jabs, all these things, right? Depends on which country you're in, right? If you're in New Zealand, yeah, they will hold you down and shoot it into you, okay? That's just where New Zealand's at. But this is the public health emergency of international concern is the key word that's telling all the governments around the world, hey, gear up for the next pandemic, okay? I'll continue this as another, 30 seconds or so.
I have accepted that advice. The detection and rapid spread of a new clade of Mpox in Eastern DRC, its detection in neighboring countries that had not previously reported Mpox, and the potential for further spread within Africa and beyond is very worrying. In addition to other outbreaks of other clades of Mpox in other parts of Africa, it's clear that a coordinated international response is essential to stop these outbreaks and save lives.
So there you go. It's clear that a coordinated international effort is needed. All right. So if you look at the words behind the words, what it is, it's like, okay, world, it's time to kick into gear. Look at how quickly the COVID pandemic was initiated. It was almost like they planned it in advance. I mean, honestly, it was so well coordinated. You'd almost think, maybe it'll call me some tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, but you'd almost think that they had some sort of meeting, say in October the year before, called Event 201, where they actually planned the whole thing out and war gamed it and laid out exactly how it was going to happen. They predicted exactly what was going to be happening. Anyway, we're seeing that again. Here's a great post on Twitter from Ann Vandersteel who says, national emergency coming. Tedros just declared monkeypox a PHEIC, okay? Public health emergency of international concern. And Vandersteel, great, fantastic reporter. She says this is a precursor to global lockdowns. Using global emergency, the WHO DG Tedros, a Marxist, will push for mandates and jabs to, quote, stop the spread. The U.S. government will follow suit and either allow the election using mail-in ballots or cancel it altogether. Do not comply. So since we're talking about the election in tonight's show, it's important to cover what's happening with the WHO, okay? Now, I mentioned to you the issue with the theft of the Social Security numbers, okay? This is important. I'll bring this up for you, okay? This is an article on entrepreneur.com. Everyone's Social Security number has reportedly been compromised in a massive data hack. So I'm literally talking about you, the person in America that's watching this show. Your social security number is now being sold on the dark web. Okay, so it says a hacking group allegedly leaked 2.7 billion pieces of data. Now, here's where it's interesting. The hacking group is called USDOD. It's like, like you probably heard how they kind of throw it in our face and they laugh at us, they mock us. USDOD, could that be the DOD? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Is claiming responsibility for leaking the personal information of Americans. They're supposedly selling it for $3.5 million. So the records includes names, addresses, and social security numbers. Okay, so and this is we're talking about 2.7 billion pieces of data. The CSV file is like 250 gigabytes or something massive like that. Which, if you know spreadsheets, that's a huge spreadsheet. So this data is actually now being sold out on the dark web. So unfortunately, there's probably not much we can do about this. I mean, hopefully you have LifeLock or you've got some sort of service that you can use to protect your identity and at least alert you. Right, that's the best thing you probably could do is one of those systems like that. That if someone applies for a bank loan in Kansas using your ID and your social security number, companies like LifeLock will then alert you and say, "Hey, we detected this being used. There's been a credit draw using your social security number." So that's probably the best way to protect yourself. But what I think that, okay, I'm speculating a little bit, which is a lot of what I do, is I'm looking at the data and saying, okay, this could mean that, is that we know that the plans of the elites, so the globalists, the cabal, the deep state, whatever you want to call them, include some sort of digital ID, some sort of biometric monitoring, right? Because that's the only way, according to them, that's the only way you can know that you're not a fraud. So this makes me wonder. And again, they shove this stuff, they hide it in plain sight. Is this a DoD operation? I don't know, right? Or could this be some hacker? Or could this be some hacker that's being paid by some nefarious international organization like the UN or the WHO? I have no idea. But what concerns me, though, is the idea that they might use this in part of the narrative to say, look, folks, this is why we need digital biometric IDs, because your identity is no longer safe, because everyone's social security number in the entire United States has now been leaked and sold on the dark web by hackers. So the only way to keep everyone in America safe from identity fraud is to roll out a massive digital ID biometric system where if you want to say you want to go to your bank and you want to apply for a loan, that they're going to say, "Oh, sorry, sir, your physical social security card is no longer accepted. You now need to have an official government ID, and please look into this little device here. It's going to scan your retina, and then it needs you to take a handprint to make sure it's actually you." To me, this is a brilliant idea. If you want to force the entire citizens into a biometric system where you're forcing this, hey, this is great. It's like, okay, for your safety, right? Okay, problem, reaction, solution. For your safety, we are now going to need everybody to comply with our digital biometric ID system that will now be rolled out in every bank across America, every car dealership across America, any place that you would possibly use your social security number is now going to have a mandatory biometric scan, because those bad hackers, the US DoD hackers, they stole your ID and they leaked it to the public. So now we can only come to protect you with our next level of taking away your rights. It's almost like the Patriot Act after 9/11. Almost. Except it would be way worse. Anyway, that's just a speculation. Maybe it's just some hacker trying to make a buck. $3.5 million is not a bad payday. If you can hack into some sort of government system, I'm not saying you should do it, but it's worth looking at. It's worth thinking about. So, all right. So, folks, we're now going to dive into crowd control and the idea behind polls, right? Because we're seeing now the polls are coming out, and every time I see a new poll, every day I go on the Twitter and I see, oh, there's a new poll, and everyone's talking about it, and the bets being placed on it, and you've got the left saying, oh, look, we're surging ahead. You have the right saying, oh, it's a fake poll, and so I want to look at okay, we're talking about the polls. I've got a lot of polls to show you, But I'm going to be taking a big look back. Okay. That's also part of it. I'm going to scale back and look at the polls from the bigger picture of social engineering. Now, why are polls important? Okay. Because they affect the way that people think. Okay. It's an important tool in crowd control. So I'm going to start with, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Asch experiment. So I would tell you what it is, but actually I found a video of the original Asch experiment that shows the power of being influenced by thinking what other people think. Okay, so I'm gonna pull this up now. I'm gonna play this little video for you. It is a minute 57, so about a 2-minute video. And this is the original footage from the Asch experiment, because this right here is gonna set the tone for our entire discussion, because we're gonna be getting into, I brought books, right, folks? I brought it all. Okay, we've got Gustav Le Bon, The Crowd. We've got Edward Bernay's Propaganda, and we've got Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which should be in every tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist's bookshelf. Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. So we'll be getting into these, but first I have this video for you. It's about 2 minutes of the Asch experiment. So check this one out.
The Asch experiment is one of psychology's oldest and most popular pieces of research. A volunteer is told that he's taking part in a visual perception test. What he doesn't know is that the other participants are actors, and he's the only person taking part in the real test, which is actually about group conformity.
Please begin. The experiment you will be taking part in today involves the perception of line length. Your task will be simply to look at the line here on the left and indicate which of the 3 lines on the right is equal to it in length. So, for example, if you...
The actors have been told to match the wrong lines. The volunteer will be monitored to see if he gives the correct answer or if he goes along with the opinion of the group and gives the wrong answer. In the first test, the correct answer is 2.
1. 1.
1. That's 2.
1.
Once again, the correct answer is 2.
3.
3.
3. 3.
3.
The Asch experiment has been repeated many times, and the results have been supported again and again. We will conform to the group. Again, we're very social creatures. We're very much aware of what the people around us think. We want to be liked. We don't want to be seen to rock the boat, so we will go along with the group. Even if we don't believe what people are saying, we'll still go along.
1.
1.
1.
1. Group dynamics is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology.
1. 1.
So there you go. I'm sorry, can you hear me 1 second? What is going on? Can you hear me okay? Testing. Okay, there we go. Sorry, my audio cut out real quick in my ear. So that right there, so the Asch experiment, that is a really important experiment that shows the power of controlling the public by convincing people that this is what the other people are thinking. Now you can see why that's really important in polling, because if someone is on the fence, or even, here's the thing, if someone believes something strongly, like the guy in that experiment, where he's looking at those lines and he sees that, wait, it's line 3. Like, I know it's line 3, but everyone else is saying it's line 2, so I'm going to say it's also line 2. So you can imagine that when somebody is either A, in a situation where they're not sure whether, like, they're legitimately not sure. Okay, so take an independent voter, for instance. They're not sure about Trump or Harris. Okay, you can see how a poll will very easily sway them. But what you can also see is that somebody who's even quite sure of what they think they're going to do, they can also be swayed if they believe the group is doing something different than what they believe. As you saw, like the guy said 2, not because he believed that he said the wrong answer, not because he believed it, but because he didn't want to be different than a group. So this is very important. So we're going to look at some historical context of the importance of group crowd control controlling the masses, mass hypnosis, etc. So we're going to go back in history. So we're going to start with some quotes from Gustave Le Bon. Okay, so this book right here, Gustave Le Bon, actually that would be the French Gustave Le Bon. So this book was written in 1895. So you can see right there. It's called The Crowd, a study of the popular mind. He's a Frenchman, and it was written after some of the revolutions over in Paris, the Paris Commune, etc. Now, I've heard before that he was commissioned to understand how to control the crowds because the elites saw, even if some of them were behind the Paris Commune, for instance, they saw what the power of a crowd could do, and they were concerned with it. And that was one of the main focuses, is understanding how powerful the crowd is and why controlling the crowd is so important. So I've got a few quotes here. This is one quote from him. This is in the book. It says, "The masses have never thirsted after truth. Whoever can supply them with illusions is easily their master. Whoever attempts to destroy their illusions is always their victim." Okay, it's interesting. The masses have never thirsted for truth. Whoever can supply them with illusions is easily their master. Okay, so another quote from him. This wasn't in his book. This might be a quote from him elsewhere. He says, "All the civilizations we know have been created and directed by small intellectual aristocracies, never by people in the mass. The power of crowds is only to destroy." Again, there's him recognizing the power of the crowd. The power of the crowds is only to destroy. Okay, so now, fast forward. So this book was written in 1895, published in French originally. And now we're going to fast forward to 1928 when Edward Bernays wrote this book called Propaganda. So Edward Bernays, if you're not familiar with him, I highly recommend reading his books. I think he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. Okay. Very, very important person to understand in terms of the role of social engineering. He's like the godfather of social engineering. He's the godfather of advertising, but advertising really is social engineering, right? How do you convince 1 million people to go buy some Dove soap? Good advertising. Okay. So I've got two quotes from him. These are both from this book. He says, "If we understand the mechanisms and motives of the group mind, it is now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will, without their knowing it, in almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking. We are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind." Okay, one other quote from him here. Actually, two more quotes for you. "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country." Okay, and again, I think this is part of the larger quote I read. "We are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind." So this is why it's really important to understand what's behind what we're seeing today. Why is it that, and I know that if you're watching this show, you're someone that sees through a lot of what's happening. Now, not all of it. Look, we're still being deceived. There are so many lies. There's layers and layers and layers of lies in our society that even if you're a truth seeker, you're someone watching shows like this, whatever it is, you're still actually believing a lot of lies. You just don't know it, right? It's like you don't know it's a lie until you discover it's a lie. And before you discover it's a lie, it's actually a truth in your mind. And that's the problem, is that a lot of people are convinced they know the truth, but they've been fed lies and they can't see outside of it. So we looked at these two books. Now we're going to take a quick look at Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. So this is a book, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a book that should be on every truth seeker's bookshelf. Okay. I won't get too detailed into the book itself. I have a few quotes, but I'll tell you basically the origins of this book are mysterious. Supposedly, there's a big caveat here. Supposedly, there was a guy, I think it was in the 1980s, that was buying used copier machines for parts and parting them out. And inside one of these copier machines, he found a printed copy of this book. Like, this is the original, a copy reproduction original. If you look at like it's like old photocopied information and diagrams. I mean, it's a pretty interesting book. But so the document that was supposedly was one of the original pamphlets that was distributed at one of, if not the first, I think it was in 1958, supposedly the first Bilderberg meeting. So the meeting of all these elites coming together and figuring out how they're going to control society and take over the world and put it in a one world government. This was basically, supposedly, the manual they were given. And it was all about silent weapons for quiet wars. This is how they're going to destroy society. Now, you can look at this and try to debunk it. But if you've read it, if you've read through this manual, and if you've studied it, and you look at what's happening in today in society, it's hard. It's honestly hard to ignore. It's now, look, it came out in the 80s. So even if it came out as a fake in the 80s, our society has changed so much directly in line with this book that it's frightening. If it came out in the 50s, it's like mind-blowing how prophetic this book was. And actually, I'm going to be doing an entire show on this. I think at some point I'm going to do just a massive deep dive show into this book. But I want to read for you out of this book. So I'll pull up, this is the book itself. Okay, so I'm going to read you just one little page here that's talking about diversion. It's talking about basically controlling the masses. So it says, experience has proven that the simplest method of securing a silent weapon and gaining control of the public is to keep the public undisciplined and ignorant of basic system principles on the one hand, while keeping them confused, disorganized, and distracted with matters of no real importance on the other hand. This is achieved by disengaging their minds, sabotaging their mental activities, by providing a low-quality program of public education in mathematics, logic, systems design, and economics, and by discouraging technical creativity. By engaging their emotions, increasing their self-indulgence and their indulgence in emotional and physical activities, by unrelenting emotional affrontations and attacks, mental and emotional rape, by way of a constant barrage of sex, violence, and wars in the media, especially the TV and the newspapers, giving them what they desire in excess, junk food for thought, and depriving them of what they really need, rewriting history and law, and subjecting the public to the deviant creation, thus being able to shift their thinking from personal needs to highly fabricated outside priorities. It says, these preclude their interest in and discovery of the silent weapons of social automation technology. Social automation technology. So it's really what's, it's talking about, and it goes deeply into this, is basically like dumbing down the masses, getting the masses distracted with things that have no meaning, that are completely dumb, lowering the education. It even talks about like art and culture and music, and lowering the quality of music. If you look at the top 10 chart these days, you can see it's mostly garbage, right? It's a lot of like explicit lyrics, rap music with, and if you listen to it and you read the lyrics, it's just trash. Like you look at Mozart and Beethoven and look at the greats, and you look at like how that was the prevailing music at the time. Look at what the music is now. It's just like, it's not only like of poor quality in terms of creativity and craftsmanship and the skill of the artist, but it's actually incredibly degenerate, like the stuff it's talking about. And so a lot of that is really rooted in this book about how to basically control the masses. Okay, so there's another website I'm going to bring up here that actually helps kind of craft the overall narrative we're looking at today. So this is an article I found on, it's called the MIT Press Readers. This is it's called Masters of Crowds, The Rise of Mass Social Engineering. It says a deep history of mass manipulation from the 20s to the mid 70s. So interesting article. This was a Marxist journalist and I think speaker that sat down with Edward Bernays in the 90s. So I'll read the introduction really quickly and I'll get to my point here. So it says, in a house in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1990, a 40-something Marxian critical scholar of consumerism interviewed a wizened man of nearly 100 years, a man who had helped build the very consumer society the scholar was criticizing. The younger man was Stuart Ewan, a professor of film and media studies at the Hunter College. The older was Edward Bernays, one of the most important public relations pioneers of the 20th century. It says, although their backgrounds were different, Bernays warmed up to Ewan, seeing him as a member of the intellectual few who was, quote, charged with the responsibility of contemplating and influencing the tide of history. So this also makes me think that maybe Bernays himself, and I should probably study it, maybe he was actually more of a Marxist. The fact that, he's cozying up with this Marxist professor, and he's considering this Marxist professor one of the intellectual few who should have the responsibility of shaping society and everything. It's pretty suspicious. But the point I want to get here, I'm going to scroll all the way down this article to one key point about social engineering. Okay, so he's walking through the different ways that, like the managerial social engineers, previously to that, before historically, was the social reformers. These are people that are trying to change society, basically. And then you have the introduction of these social engineers. So I'm going to read a few paragraphs about the social engineers here. So PR and the mass social engineers. So it says, mass social engineers owe their livelihoods to the electrical engineers who brought about new electronic mass media in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Telegraphy, radio, cinema, and later television, along with the older technology of newspapers, all created conditions of possibility for coordinated nationwide media campaigns. So it says, very quickly, the ambitions of previous social reformers and managerialists to shape society as a whole seemed plausible. Mass media could reach more people than just those in settlement houses or on machine shop floors. Social control on a national level appeared within reach. So this is really key, because if you look and you study the history of mass control, right, mass media, mass communication, you had the printing press, right? Then you had radio, then you had television, and now we have the internet. Okay, which really merges, the internet is a merger of the newspaper, the magazine, the radio, the television. I mean, like what you're watching right now, or you're listening to it on a podcast. This is the modern day TV, this is the modern day radio. So when they first brought out this technology, you and I had no way of accessing this technology. Like when they first came out with radio broadcasts or television shows, you couldn't reach more people than just your small neighborhood, for instance. Like maybe you could, you could call in on a local radio station and reach a handful of people, but there was an extremely high barrier to entry to get into the mass media. So if you wanted to influence a lot of people, you'd have to go study journalism and maybe join the CIA and study the Operation Mockingbird program. And before you know it, you're on CNN. Okay. But the point being is that the average person could not use these tools of communication to influence the masses. And so this was amazing. Like for the deep state, this was a dream come true, because they could use these trusted media figures. And folks, it's been happening for a long time, right? If you look back and you think, oh, well, Walter Cronkite, he was one of the good ones, or Barbara Walters, or any people. I'm not saying that these are all bad people, but what I'm saying is that at that time, the CIA and other bad actors had a significant amount of control over people that were, we thought of as being journalists. And so it was great for them because they could shape people's thoughts and beliefs so strongly, and the trust in the radio and the TV was like at an all-time high. I mean, I think you see those old pictures of the families sitting around for a radio broadcast of whoever it was. The trust in that was absolutely high. But then you had the advent of the internet and then social media, and it was like the dream of population control times a million, because now it was bidirectional. It wasn't as them putting a broadcast out and seeing and hoping it reached people. It was them being able to monitor and track and give us information and see how we respond to information, give us more information. So the level of social engineering once the internet came about was absolutely massive. And now that we have AI, it's insane. So there's a lot of people talking about how there's these photos and videos of the Kamala Harris rallies that they're saying are AI, and they might be. I haven't looked. I've seen a lot of videos of big crowds that look real, but I've also seen a lot of stuff that looks like it is AI. And thing is, it's probably a mix, because confusion is how they do things. But if you're looking at where things are now, and this is why we're having this conversation, because take a step back 20 years ago, right? There's probably no way or say 30 years ago, there's probably no way that me, Seth Holthouse, could create some sort of program that would be reaching millions of people. I mean, that's, like every month our program in America is reaching millions of people, right? That's how much we've grown. It's great. But there's no way I could have done this 20 or 30 years ago, right? And maybe if I was an early pioneer, like a Rush Limbaugh or something like that, maybe, right? But it was very, very difficult. But what's happened though, is that they built this media empire, and then they built the social media empire to help reinforce their media empire. But then people started using the technology against them. So we have things like Rumble or modern day Twitter under Elon Musk, where they're losing their ability to censor us. And this is where things are getting really hairy, because this is why there's so much chaos. Because if you look around right now, you look online, whether it's the polls or the election stuff, or there's complete and utter chaos. You can find 1 million people with one opinion that they're sure is absolutely right. And then you can find 1 million people with the exact opposite opinion. They're sure they're exactly right as well. So we're in this new age of influence, but we're in the age where someone like me can rise to become someone that influences a certain portion of society. I mean, some of my shows have gotten, over 1 million views. I mean, look at the first video I made that Donald Trump shared. I mean, it got my idea, I think it got probably hundreds of millions of views. So the first video we put out, The Plot to Steal America, literally got hundreds of millions of views. Like, that's more than a CNN broadcast or anything. So the ability for the small person to influence is massive, right? It's absolutely massive. And this is a threat to the system, because this is a system they built to control us, but we're using it against them. And so this is why when you see what's happening with the polling data or AI images, what they're trying to do is they're trying to take different tools they have of public manipulation and inject them into the social media, inject them into the narrative, so that if you look on Twitter, for instance, with polls, you can see that, every day as a new poll is out, like everyone's freaking out about it, right? They're saying, oh gosh, we got to try harder. Trump is down 3 points in Pennsylvania or this, and everyone responds to it without thinking that, hey, it's like these are tools of manipulation. So I want to take a look now at where the polls are currently at, because it's worth looking at where the polls are at, where this data is coming from. Is there any other data we can look at to see, hey, are these polls accurate? Because it would be very easy if looking at the Ash experiment, you can see, gosh, if I saw that Ash experiment, I'd say, gosh, if I'm a social engineer and I can figure out how to do the Ash experiment on a nationwide scale and get people like in their own homes to be thinking, gosh, maybe I should believe what most of the other Americans are thinking. It's brilliant. Enter polls. Okay. Now, in the data I'm going to be showing you today, to me, it says the polls are lying, right? There's data that I'm going to be looking at that is like, if you look at the data and you look at the polls that say New York Times, for instance, like right here, you look at the polls that New York Times is putting out, and this isn't necessarily their poll, they're pulling together a bunch of polls, right? But you look at this and it's like, hey, this isn't making sense. So right now, the big story is that the overall, right? Okay, look right here, for instance, that Harris is +5. Okay. Now here is a national polling average, right? This is just Harris versus Trump, and New York Times has pulled together all these different polls. They're showing that Harris is at 48%, Trump is at 47%. You go into different, now, here's key though. You look at some of the swing states, Wisconsin, Harris at 50%, Michigan, Harris at 49%, Pennsylvania, Harris at 48%, Trump at 48% tied. So if you look at this and you look into these, okay, these are the actual polls themselves. So New York Times has compiled data from 295 polls. Okay. So you look at, now they've organized the polls from the select pollsters or the all pollsters. So select pollsters are the ones that say are the most reputable. But you can see that most of these pollers are heavily swayed towards Harris, right? So here, University of California, their poll has Harris at +25. They're saying that Harris is at 59% and Trump is at 34%. Okay. Now, how can you go, like, if you're polling now, great, okay, granted, the city are polling University of California students, perhaps, but it's sponsored by the LA Times. Okay. It's like, how can you pull that data out? So the polls, though, are making a significant impact, because let's take a look at this. Okay. So this is the Kobesi letter, who I've talked about, great Twitter page to be following. They say breaking prediction markets. Okay. So you have your polls and then you have your prediction markets, right? So the prediction markets are, hey, I'm going to place a bet. People bet on everything. Okay, like literally, people probably place bets on whether a dog will poop on this square of the sidewalk today. Like that's how much people have a gambling problem. They gamble with everything. So of course they're gambling on who's going to win the election. So here we go. So the prediction markets are now showing a 53% chance of Kamala Harris winning the 2024 election, according to Polymarket. So these markets are different than polls in that the probabilities are based on real money wagers. In 2016, polls put odds of Hillary Clinton beating Trump at 70%, with some as high as 99%, which we're going to be looking at some of those polls from Hillary and Trump. So Trump's victory in 2016 ended up resulting in one of the largest polling and election forecaster failures in history. Will prediction markets prove to be more or less accurate? So what you can see here is that, like, these aren't polls. This is literally where people are placing their money. But the people that are betting on who's going to win the election, guess where they're placing their bets on? Guess where they're getting their data from? The polls, right? By and large, people are watching the polls, right? Like this is where, say you're betting on horses and stuff. You're not just randomly picking things. You're looking into the experts that are analyzing the likelihood of which horse is winning, right? Or which horse is going to win. And that's what these polls are showing in essence, right? It's showing the mass belief. Now, granted, say the horse, you might be looking at an expert saying X or Y, but when you look at these polling experts and what the data they bring together, this is where this is where it's coming from. So you look at the fact that 53% are saying Harris is going to win. This shows you that the polls are so powerful that people are actually placing bets in favor to follow the polls. So I want to take a look at the actual polls themselves because, okay, not the polls themselves, but the actual other data. So according to New York Times, right, we can see, I'll pull that up again. So according to this information, right, in most places, it's either like a really, really close tie. Sorry about that. It's either a really, really close tie or Harris is up, by 3 points or 4 points or 5 points or 25 points. That is, that's collectively the poll, right? The polls are saying that Harris is going to win by this points, by this much. Okay. So let's take a look though. So here is a post. This is from Kyle Becker that I want to hone in on here. Okay. So this is interesting because this is what the polls are telling us, but let's look at some other data and see if the other data correlates with the polls, because I have come to the conclusion that I think the polls are lying and that the polls are actually being used as a, silent weapon, as a propaganda tool to control the crowd. Okay. That's what I think. But this is some other data, for instance. Okay. So what they're showing us in a state like Pennsylvania, okay, this is about Pennsylvania. So in Pennsylvania, I'll pop back over to the New York Times post here. So they're saying that in Pennsylvania, it's state Pennsylvania. Okay, let's see. See if I go state by state. Okay, here we go. Sorry, folks. So Pennsylvania, right now they're saying is a dead tie. Okay, this is what the New York Times, based upon all the averages of all the polls coming in, saying it's 48%, dead tie in Pennsylvania. So let's take a look, though, at this other information that's come out on Twitter. So here it is. Okay, so Kyle Becker saying, on closer inspection, Kamala is cooked. The hype is not real. Dems are getting slaughtered on voter registrations. Pollsters keep oversampling Dems for no darn reason except deceiving voters. It's all designed to try to keep Harris within the MOC, margin of cheating. Okay, so let's take a look at this actual data because this is interesting. So this person here, he says, I decided to look at the swings of certain demographics from the New York Times final Pennsylvania poll from 2020 compared to the poll released just a few days ago. Okay, so this is looking at the swing of voters in Pennsylvania. So what it's showing for this case, so from 2020 to 2024, if you look at this from just males, it was Trump +3 in 2020. It's Trump +3 in 2024. So there's no swing. Right, they're saying that according to the New York Times, there's no change. Females, okay, they went from in 2020 being Biden +14 to now in 2024 being Harris +7. What that shows you is that Trump gained 7 points. Okay, that's a big swing, a 7-point swing. Okay, looking by the age bracket, this is crazy. Ages 18 to 29, in 2020, it was Biden +30. Okay, that age group was massive in their support for Biden, ages 18 to 29, that +30. In 2020, In 2024, they're at +2. So what they're saying is that Trump gained 28 points in Pennsylvania within the 18 to 29 bracket. Absolutely insane. Okay, age 30 to 44. It went from Trump +2 to Harris +4. So Harris gained 6 points. Okay, keep looking. Let's look at let's look at rate by race. White went from Trump +2 in 2020 to Trump +3 in 2024. So among the whites, Trump gained 1 point. Okay, here is the absolute kicker. Non-white in 2020 was Biden +52. Okay, the immigrants, the migrants, the non-whites, whatever, Biden had a +52 in 2020 in Pennsylvania. In 2024, Harris is down to +23. So Trump gained +29. So if you look at this information, okay, and you look at how close the race was, and we're talking without all the shenanigans, look at supposedly how close the race was for Pennsylvania in 2020. They're now saying in their polls that it's a 48-48. They're saying it's a dead tie in Pennsylvania. Yet look at this massive swing in voters. Okay. Another thing I want to look at with you, just as damning. So this is from George B. Heisey tweets. So this is interesting. He says, apparently Kamala Harris is surging, right, according to the polls, yet somehow Republicans gained 252,000, almost 253, new registered voters, and her party lost 19,000 in July. So this is crazy, right? Because a lot of people, you register to vote as a Democrat, Republican, right, or independent. Pardon me. And that registration is really important. So, like, Scott Kessler, for instance, Pressler, who's going around doing all the registrations, really important work. So this is crazy because this shows you, right? This shows you a lot of information about how people will vote, and you can see trends in this. So let's look at here. Okay, he's saying, looking at the registration differences. Okay, so similar to the vote, what we just looked at. Okay, so I'm gonna focus in on state Republicans and Democrats, so you can see it big here. Okay, so this is the change, right? So in July 2024, so in Alaska, for instance, they added 700 voters Republican, Democrats 400. Okay, look at California. This is insane. California added 94,000 new Republican voters. The Democrats lost 43,000. Done. Lost. Okay. Florida, okay, gained 67,000 new Republican voters while gaining 22,000 Democratic voters. Okay, Democrat voters. Pennsylvania gained 21,000 Republican voters, 5,000 Democrat voters. Now 18,000 others there, which you can't see. Sorry, you can't see it on the screen. Right, there we are. So this is the total change, right? Just looking at here's Republican versus Democrat in July. Total change, 252,000 new Republican voters registered, minus 19,000 Democrat voters. How can anybody look at this information and still tell us, as we see right here, that it is a 50-50 or that Harris is a few points ahead? How can you possibly look at that and make sense of it? Again, this is just another data point that shows the polls are rigged. They're not based in reality. There's selective sampling, right? If I go, let's just say, for instance, okay, this is maybe a bad analogy, but let's just say I'm sampling. I'm saying, okay, do you like Chinese food? Okay. And we're saying, okay, we believe that the vast majority of people in America absolutely love Chinese food. And I walk into a Chinese restaurant and I sample everyone there and say, look, 95% of Americans love Chinese food. Well, that's exactly how they do these polls, right? It's called selective sampling. It's not actually true, right? There's a bias in the sampling. But as we looked at with the mass mind control and the Ash experiment, it's so critical because people are looking at these polls to figure out how to decide things. And it's misleading a lot of it. It's criminal. I mean, honestly, it's absolutely criminal. It's misleading people into thinking that things are one way when the real data shows that they're not. But I want to take a look back, though, in time, because I want to look at what happened in 2016. All right. So this was updated November 8th, 2016. This is on New York Times. And what they're showing there, according to their national polling average, was that Hillary Clinton had a basically 46% chance and Trump had basically 43% chance. Okay. So we had 46% versus 43%. And a lot of the polls were saying literally, that Hillary had a 99% chance of winning. So if you look down here, you can see everything. All the polls were showing Clinton, Clinton, Clinton. Okay. All the polls were showing that Hillary Clinton. But what we see, obviously that's not what happened. So let's take a look though. Okay. Why is it they were so far off? Going back to that post from the Cabesi letter. Okay. Who they say up here, here's the important question. It said Trump's victory in 2016 ended up resulting in one of the largest polling and election forecaster failures in history. Was it a failure or was it a psychological operation to convince people something that wasn't true and they couldn't control the mechanism enough on the night of the voting when all things was counted? They couldn't control enough to manifest what they were trying to make come reality through their polls. Right. So if we look into kind of the analysis of what happened in 2016, so here, this is a Pew Research Center article. It says why 2016 election polls missed their mark. It's interesting. Okay, so Pew Research, they do a massive amount of research. I've found them to be very helpful, right, in business and researching audience and market size and demographics. It's great. They do amazing research. However, this is kind of funny almost. It's like, okay, why did the 2016 election polls miss their mark? Right? There's got to be a reason, right? There's got to be some sort of rational reason. You can't just say that it's a psychological operation, Seth. That's tinfoil hat conspiracy. There's got to be some sort of real reason, like the voter turnout or something that all the polls were wrong. Because if you just say it's because the cabal was trying to use the polls to influence the public into voting for Hillary and not for Trump, you can't say that. It's not a real reason. So Pew Research has got to have the reason. Okay, well, let's take a look at it. Okay, so they say, okay, the results of Tuesday's presidential election came as a surprise to nearly everyone who had been following the national and state election polling, which consistently projected Hillary Clinton as defeating Donald Trump. Relying largely on opinion polls, election forecasters put Clinton's chance of winning in anywhere from 70% to as high as 99%. And pegged her as the heavy favorite to win a number of states such as Pennsylvania and Wisconsin that in the end were taken by Trump. How could the polls have been so wrong about the state of the election? Okay, and here's their answer. Wait, let's scroll on here. Okay, here is their answer. Pollsters don't have a clear diagnosis yet for the misfires, and it will likely be some time before we know for sure what happened. Okay, they don't know. This article, right? And I read through it. They give you a bunch of reasons, but they're not really reasons. The fact is that they can't tell you. They can't give you a logical reason as to why the polls for Hillary was so wildly wrong. Okay, so as we're now entering into the 2024 election with Trump and Harris, and you see everyone talking about these polls, and Fox News is talking about the polls, and CNN is talking about the polls, and the big Twitter accounts are talking about the polls, just remember, these polls are part of a social engineering psychological operation. Don't be distracted by them. That's the point. Don't be distracted by them, because look at what happened in 2016. All right. Now, if you look at there's a whole other part of this, which is the Harris campaign and how they're presenting it. All the people showing up in these big rap concerts where they're giving away free tickets to A-list celebrities, and people are coming in and they're giving them a sign, and then they take all the pictures, and all the pictures show these huge crowds. It's all about manipulating the public. That's what they're doing. They're trying to make the public think that certain things are some way, and they're not. So hopefully this was helpful for you. I think I probably could have gone into 10 different directions and covered a lot more content, but our hour is already up, and we packed a lot into this episode. So I hope one quick thing before we sign off though is let me know in the comments what you think. I love getting your feedback. I read almost all the comments put on the social media platforms, especially Rumble, right? Rumble and Telegram and Twitter. But I really appreciate your feedback. I really do, because you're smart people. And a lot of what I've discovered comes from you. So thank you for your feedback. The other thing is that if you're watching this on Rumble, make sure you hit that green follow button. If you're watching it on YouTube, make sure you're watching on Rumble next time, because YouTube is censoring like crazy. And maybe this show right here will get pulled down from YouTube because I'm talking about elections and I'm not talking about the official things they want me to say. So if you're watching on YouTube, please come over and watch on Rumble, a platform that supports free speech. Also, just a quick reminder, make sure that you go enter to win. So right now, into the show, there's no excuses, right? When the show's over, go to maninamerica.com/win, put your name and your email in, enter to win your free silver. And lastly, one thing that I think is really, really important to talk about is what's coming next, okay? So we talked about at the beginning the financial system. We talked about the leak of the Social Security stuff and how it might be the precursor for some sort of digital ID program, which then turns into central bank digital currency, where they're pulling in, everything gets monitored. You have your own social score. It's basically it's China 2.0 in America. Bad stuff. But the other thing that we're seeing, though, is an absolute, very blatant attack on the food supply, right? So Kissinger himself said, he who controls the food controls the people, right? They know that. They are planning this. You look at all the different food factories being burned down. You look at the mysterious, the bird flu. They're killing off millions of chickens. They're slaughtering cattle. The government is actually paying farmers to shut their farms down. Okay, so I have a feeling, my thoughts is that they think that Trump will get in. There's too much mass support. The crowd that they fear supports him. And so my thinking is that what's going to happen is once he gets in, they're going to completely try to decimate the country and just going to say, look, it's all your fault. Collapse the financial system, collapse the food supply, et cetera. So when it comes to food, this is important because food is, okay, you might say, look, there's no way I will comply with their tyranny. I'm not going to get one of those things they stick in your arms. I'm not going to get the vaccine passports or any of that kind of stuff. But here's the deal. Is that if you have no food because the government has seized control of the food supply, which happens in communist-controlled countries, which we're getting close to that, they use that food to control you. They put you in a bread line. They say, look, you can only have bread to feed your family if you take this thing in your arm, if you have your digital ID. So you have to have resilience. Now, the number one thing you can do is learn how to grow your own food, learn how to raise your chickens. Next to that, build community, right? Get to know your local farmers, get to know your local milk farm, go to the farmer's market. It's so important to build connections with food producers locally. But what's also key is having your own food supply. Absolutely key, right? So whether it's buckets of rice and beans or whatever it is, you need to have food supply for your family. My personal recommendation is at least 3 to 6 months worth of food for every person in your family, right? For me, it's way more than that because I'm a crazy nut job prepper, okay? But have at least 3 to 6 months of food for each person in your family. Now, if you want something convenient, the food buckets are great. I can tell you, not all food buckets are made the same. There's some companies that they shove all kinds of like Kool-Aid and pudding in there to make sure that calories are cheap, right? That's what they do. They make it say cheaper. But for me, though, I'm buying high quality food for my family. So the company that I recommend more than any other company, and I've researched a ton of them, I've bought a ton of different companies, I sampled them. Before I decided to work with Heaven's Harvest and promote them on the show, I made sure they made it to the top, and they did. So Heaven's Harvest, Christian, patriot family, small, local-owned business here in America. They care about the future of this company. I talk to the owner all the time. A great guy, I interview him sometimes. If you want to get high-quality, storable food for your family, it's Heaven's Harvest. Honestly, don't go buy those junky other buckets that they're shoving in pudding and Kool-Aid. Say, hey, look, we're the cheapest per calorie. You want to buy good food, and good food is at Heaven's Harvest. So go to heavensharvest.com. Okay, use promo code Seth. It's SETH. Save 15%. Heavensharvest.com. And just do an audit, right? Ask yourself, if tomorrow the government seized control of our food supply, or the grocery store shut down because of a power grid down scenario, how long will your family last with the food you have in your house? It's a serious question. And look, if you're the head of your household, it's your responsibility. Okay, if you're the woman of your household and the head of your household's busy working and not paying attention to stuff, and you're paying attention, it's your responsibility to make sure that every person in your family has food that they can live on for at least a couple of months to get through whatever the initial problem is. So again, that's heavensharvest.com. Use promo code Seth, save 15%. All right, folks, It was lovely to have you all here tonight. Thank you so much for joining me on tonight's show. I will see you again tomorrow night. Take care. God bless. Have a wonderful show. And make sure you leave your comments. And if you love the show, share it. That also helps so much. If you share this, if you enjoy the show, if you learn something, please share this content because it really helps me to reach more people, which is my mission. I'm fighting against this stuff, folks. I'm fighting against their silent weapons, right? I'm my own silent weapon called Man in America, and this is my fight. All right, folks, take care. God bless. I'll see you soon.